Chapter 6. The King is Dead. The week following Alex's trip to headquarters was one of unnerving quiet. The silence, however, was not peaceful. It was a heavy, expectant hush before a storm breaks. A rumor, subtle as a change in barometric pressure, had begun to circulate. A high-level external audit was being conducted on all submissions for the head of digital strategy position. Andy Vance, who normally strutted through the office like he owned it, now wore his expensive suits like armor against an unseen threat. The forced smile was gone, replaced by a tight, anxious line. The seed of paranoia Alex had planted in the gilded cage of the C-suite was beginning to bear fruit. Alex watched it all with the detached calm of a spectator. He had set the board. He had moved the institutional pieces. Now, all he needed was a catalyst, the human element that would turn a quiet corporate investigation into a sudden, bloody execution. Late one evening, from the sanctuary of his apartment, Alex made his final move. He crafted a simple, anonymous email from a secure, disposable address. The recipient was Mark Sharma. The subject line was a single, irresistible word: leverage. The body of the message was concise, a masterpiece of temptation aimed directly at a desperate man's heart. I know what you did for Andy Vance. I also know he is presenting a stolen strategic proposal to senior management. The original work belongs to Sucognito Analytics. They would pay a substantial consulting fee for proof of this theft, but perhaps Vance would pay more for your silence. The choice is yours. He attached a single, heavily redacted slide from the Sucognito proposal, just enough to be tantalizingly credible. Then he hit send, cutting the final thread that held Mark Sharma to his pathetic, coerced loyalty. He had offered the drowning man a lifeline, knowing full well it was attached to an anchor. The detonation happened 2 days later. It wasn't loud, it was brutally efficient. Alex was at his desk, betting a complex algorithm for Johnny, when he saw them. Two stone-faced men in corporate security uniforms walking purposefully towards the SEO team's pod. They didn't speak. They moved with the grim purpose of repo men, stopping directly behind Mark Sharma's chair. One of them leaned down and spoke something in Mark's ear. Mark went rigid, his face draining of all color, turning to a waxy, translucent gray. The office chatter died instantly. Every head turned. Mark shakily stood up. The second guard began unplugging his workstation, his movements practiced and impersonal. Andy watched from his glass-walled office, frozen, a look of pure panic flashing across his face before being replaced by a mask of stern, managerial concern. He had clearly hoped for a discreet solution. He had miscalculated. Mark didn't look at anyone. His shoulders were slumped in utter defeat, his gaze fixed on the worn carpet as the guards escorted him towards the HR department. He looked like a ghost leading the scene of his own death. His life in London, the future he had been so desperate to secure, had just evaporated. The pawn had been unceremoniously swept from the board. Within the hour, the whispers started, spreading through the office like a virus. Extortion. Attempted corporate espionage. He tried to blackmail Andy Vance. Andy had tried to control the narrative, reporting Mark for blackmail, but in doing so, he had invited the very scrutiny he dreaded. He'd set his own house on fire to get rid of a mouse. By lunchtime, a terse email from HR landed in every employee's inbox, speaking of a serious breach of company policy and zero tolerance for unethical conduct. By mid-afternoon, the true horror of the situation filtered through the grapevine. Mark Sharma's employment had been terminated with cause. His visa, tied directly to his job, was void. The company, legally obligated, had already notified the Home Office. His deportation was not a matter of if, but when. His life was ruined. Alex felt nothing. No pity, no remorse. Mark had been a weapon, and his purpose had been served. He waited until the end of the day. The office was emptying out, the staff eager to escape the toxic atmosphere. Andy was still in his office, the lights on, a lone figure making frantic, whispered calls. He looked cornered, haggard and terrified. The hunter was ready to face his prey. Alex walked over to Andy's office, the soft soles of his shoes making no sound on the floor. He didn't knock. He simply opened the door and stepped inside, closing it gently behind him. The click of the latch echoed in the small space like a cell door locking. Andy looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and bravado. "What do you want? Get out! I'm dealing with a serious security situation." "I know," Alex said, his voice calm, conversational. He remained standing, a dark, still silhouette against the brightly lit office beyond. "I wanted to offer my condolences. Losing a team member is always tough, especially one you worked with so closely. Mark was a disgruntled employee who tried to extort me." Andy blustered, his voice cracking. "He got what he deserved." "Did he?" Alex took a slow step forward. "He was desperate, Andy. His family was in trouble back in Dubai. He told you everything. You knew exactly which levers to pull. I saw the emails, the ones from his personal account, begging you to tell him you were done." The blood drained from Andy's face. "How? How could you possibly?" "Because a man desperate enough to perjure himself for you is desperate enough to sell you out for a better offer," Alex lied, enjoying the simplicity of it. But the blackmail wasn't the real problem, was it? It was just noise to cover the real crime. Alex leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The problem is a presentation called Nexus 2025, a paradigm of digital dominance. The problem is a small firm called Cognito Analytics. The problem is a COO who hates lawsuits more than he hates failure." Andy stared at him, his mouth slightly agape, comprehension dawning in his eyes like a slow, horrifying sunrise. He looked like a man watching his own ghost walk through the wall. "But even that isn't your biggest problem right now," Alex continued, savoring the final, devastating blow. He allowed that cold, wolfish smile to touch his lips for the first time. "Your biggest problem is your password. Future HDS Vance. A little arrogant, don't you think? It gives a man ideas." Andy Vance crumbled. All the arrogance, all the entitlement, all the carefully constructed corporate bluster dissolved into pure, childlike terror. He sank back into his expensive leather chair, his face a mask of disbelief. He wasn't looking at a rival teamlet anymore. He was looking at the architect of his doom, a digital phantom who had walked through every wall, read every secret, and pulled every string. He finally understood that he had never been in a war. He had been in a cage, and the door had just been locked by the monster he'd foolishly provoked. "What? What are you?" Andy stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I'm the man whose developer you tried to destroy," Alex said, his voice flat and cold as a tombstone. "And we need to have a conversation about your future. Or rather, your lack of one.